And yeah, Venice in the 80s and 90s, was a vibrant place.
That's
right? This was an economically and racially diverse community, and a lot of beauty was in this community, and it still is in this community. And what I learned from Venice is the value of community. Is that the richest thing you can have in life is a sense of place in the world, a sense of people, and a sense of community. And despite the problems that Venice had back in the day, it was a strong sense of community. And one of the things I did learn growing up also was that my life was, quite frankly, a lot easier than a lot of my friends. When I was walking down these streets, older boys wouldn't say, "Hey, where are you from?" I wouldn't get, gang checked. Police never stopped me when I played in this park or any park in Venice. And I was very aware that my life was easier than my friends. And so by the time I got to senior year in high school, I was set to go to UC Berkeley. And I already had friends who were from elementary school, middle school, who were already in prison. And that sense of unfairness, the sense that my life was easier and that we could start in the same community, we could go to the same schools, and we could have drastically different life outcomes, even by the time we were 18. That sense of unfairness never left me. And for me, it vested in me a sense of purpose, that I have something I need to do something with my education. I need to help others and be, if I'm going to be a part of a community, I have to be part of the solution in that community, right? So I went to UC Berkeley undergrad and graduated UC Berkeley School of Law in 2008. And if you recall, 2008, that was the height of the Great Recession, foreclosure crisis. And I moved back down to LA, moved back down to Venice, and I began working at a nonprofit called Eviction Defense Network. And shout out if anyone here knows Elena Pop, Eviction Defense Network. And I began representing low-income tenants facing eviction because I saw the gentrification from Venice to Echo Park. I saw how people were being displaced. I saw how communities were being eroded, and I wanted to do something about it. But on top of that, I saw the banks basically taking over people's homes and saying they'd rather have an empty unit and hope for the market to rebound than actually house someone. And fast forward 12 to 14 years later, and we're still in the midst of this crisis, of a housing crisis, where banks and landlords have way too much power and people in the community do not. And here we are, where the defining feature of this race is homelessness and housing. But when we talk about homelessness, and this is my son, Geronimo, and he's growing up here. But homelessness and housing have to be spoken in the same breath. We cannot blame just homelessness, mass homelessness in the wealthiest district in the city of Los Angeles and just say, oh, it's crazy people, oh, it's drug use. The fact is there are 17,000 LAUSD students who are homeless.
Exactly.
Those young people are not homeless because they're drug addicts. They're homeless because their parents have stagnant wages and rents are skyrocketing. And we've seen throughout for decades that the city of LA is prioritizing market rate development, right, and not affordable housing creation. And so we have a situation where actually the city of LA owes over 200,000 affordable housing units, and they can't create it, but they're that far behind. And so we need to talk about homelessness as a housing crisis and its connection to gentrification. Because Venice has been hollowed out by gentrification because of the prior market rate development. And it's not about who benefits in the community. And so I'm running to address this, to not say, oh, we're going to play whack-a-mole and just do sweeps. Because if we don't house people, we're just going to push people from one community to the next. Look, I have a son. I don't want him to feel unsafe. But we cannot address the homelessness crisis by just shutting down a park and saying, get out of here. They tried that in Echo Park. Guess what happened? They fenced off Echo Park. Guess where people go? Here to the boardwalk. It's just playing whack-a-mole with the problem. This is not a solution. So, okay, what are some solutions? First off, we need to strengthen renters' protections and give a right to counsel. So for anyone who's facing eviction, it means that they get a lawyer. Just like you get a public defender, you can't go in as a renter facing eviction to court. You're going to get bullied out of your home, and you're going to end up on the street. And that's been going on for far too long. Second, we need a mental health response team. That's the number one reason when we call LAPD is for mental health issues. So why would we want, say, 4 officers surrounding a person with mental health issues who got guns and academy training, as opposed to a trained clinician who's a social worker, who's a psychologist, who has a trauma-informed approach to deal with people in crisis? because we need to deal with people in crisis. Let's not sugarcoat it. People on the streets have mental health issues often because it's very difficult to live on the streets. So people descend, and we need to give them the tools. But that means when we call 911, we're actually sending people who can help them. But we also need to have an approach where people get off the streets into transitional housing and into permanent supportive housing. Yeah. This is obvious, but it's not being talked about. Permanent supportive housing, and that means creating it in the community. Venice Community Housing Corporation is an example of it, but we don't have enough of it, and we're behind schedule on it. And so what does that look like? Well, first off, we can house people who are unhoused or formerly unhoused themselves, who know the process, how difficult it is, how many hoops you have to jump through to get rehoused. And so jumping through that process, that's a job opportunity. Housing navigators can help people get a driver's license, credit check, all these things that are difficult, that are barriers. We need to be hiring people to deal with those barriers in addition to building more housing. We also need to, on a citywide, take a unified approach to homelessness and housing. Right now, it's like 15 different districts, you got 15 different approaches. And I know this sounds kind of like in the weeds, but the fact is the city of LA does not have a unified approach to homelessness because everyone does their own thing. And so we're playing whack-a-mole, pushing people off through different districts. But when we talk about housing, we can't talk about it alone. Housing is related to traffic, it's related to community safety, and it's related, quite frankly, to climate change. Because think about it, it's essential to health. Because think about all the people who used to live in Venice who now commute to the west side but can't afford to live on the west side. Yep. We need to create the housing so that people who live on the west side, work on the west side, can afford to live on the west side. That's right. We need to create, shout that out. We need to create affordable housing so for the people who used to live in Venice can come back to Venice, right? Santa Monica's doing this, a right of return. If people got displaced by the 10 freeway or the Civic Center, they're first in line for affordable housing. We need to be prioritizing people who work on the west side, are essential workers, and people who've been on the west side and have been displaced. Because we know how much this community has changed. But we also know that on a national level, we can't put a wall around our country and say, some xenophobic approach, saying, we're not letting folks in. But I'm worried that the West Side is becoming kind of similar, kind of Trumpian, kind of like, it's just for us. But the fact is, the West Side is not just for rich white people. Like, that's wrong. And we need to fight to keep folks in the community so that we retain the vibrancy of this place. And people do need to feel safe.
Yes, they
Safety
do.
is key.
Absolutely.
But here's the facts. The safest community is a well-resourced community.
Absolutely.
There's a reason why Brentwood has less crime than South Central, right? It's because there's more resources in the community. So let's give the resources so that people can feel safe, but give the resources to the people who need the resources, right? And so what does that look like? So first off, why are we wasting police officers' time dealing with mental health issues when we could be hiring mental health advocates, right? Why are we saying, let's hire more police officers when we know we have housing approaches that need to be taken? So, and also when it comes to transit, the reason why there's so much traffic on the 10 and around here is because everyone is trying to get here to work, but no one can stay here to work, so then everyone's starting at 3 o'clock and lining up to leave. If we could build affordable housing that's addressing climate change by making it easier for people to live here. And also when I talk about climate change, this is the existential crisis of our time, right?
Yes.
But this is not simply abstract and global. This is right here. The Santa Monica Mountains are going to burn more frequently because of climate change. Sea levels are rising. We got Ballona Creek. Guess what we're doing with Ballona Creek? We're using it as a gas storage facility that's on the verge of becoming another disaster with Aliso Canyon. So we need a transition to close dangerous facilities and transition people to good, clean, new jobs, a just transition. Installing, look at all these solar panels that aren't on these roofs, right? Look at all the opportunities we're missing. And so I'm also running because Los Angeles by 2035 can be 100% renewable energy.
That's right.
This is not like, I'm just coming out with a number. Literally, this is a plan being assessed by the DWP right now. right? The DWP is assessing this, and yes, it'll be more expensive to do it in 2035 as opposed to 2050, but we know with climate change we don't have the luxury of time. We got to get going. This is awesome. So I want
You can do it all.
I can do it all. But no, but look, but that's the other thing. Actually, I can't do it all. And we've seen with Mike Bonin and the negativity of and the online trolls that, in fact, no one person can do it all. And so
Right.
we need
That's
events like this
right.
because it's only with community backing can we clap back. It's only with community backing that can we say, no, this isn't just one person. You can't blame mass homelessness on one city council person. It's like holding the system accountable for its failures means that all the community groups on the west side are holding down an agenda that benefits the folks who live here or have been displaced from here. So I want to open it up to questions, and I also want to give Lalo a chance to speak. And I also honestly want to take a photo with everyone because this is beautiful, because this is the success. Like this is what we need to see. For too long, especially for 2 years of the pandemic, people have been hiding online and isolated. And right now we hear more about solutions from next door. You know, things are quite frankly, racist than we are from actual community-based solutions when people get together in person. I see a hand, so Lydia.
When you win, what will you do with the VNC, the Venice Neighborhood Council, especially LUPC, which is filled with people who are profiting from land use?
Okay.
Help!
You bring up a really good point about land use. And this is something that really excites me about running. I don't want your ears. On a granular level, we see failures block by block. Bro. Yeah. I feel like he's like,
He wants
at the
his
really
dad.